Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For today's video we're going to be taking a very small break from video reviews and instead I'm going to be giving you guys a discussion video on what I believe to be some of the coolest and the best Michael Bay orientated Transformers Studio Series figures that we've seen released from 2018 up until 2022. Now be sure to sound off down in the comment section below, let me know what you think are the best figures and whether or not you actually agree with some of my picks. Now this won't act as a ranking per se, I won't be ranking any of these figures from worst to best. I've basically just gone around in my collection and cherry picked some of the figures that I believe to be the coolest, the best looking and the biggest upgrades over their original counterparts. And we may as well kickstart things off with one of the best and most playable and enjoyable figures that we've seen released so far, that being none other than jet powered Optimus Prime. Now granted I do have the DNA design upgrade kit installed, which I think makes him look so much more accurate when in comparison to just the stock figure, but even on its own it was a fantastic piece. The way you could have a terrifically awesome looking Jetfire and Optimus in their own right, but the way they could combine to form this beauty I just thought was fantastic, and the combination process was way more accurate to the movie when in comparison to the original version that we saw released for 2009. I mean, just check this thing out, it literally doesn't look as if though it was a Hasbro figure. It looks insane. Hasbro really did do a fantastic job. Now granted DNA Design did give us this wicked looking cannon, this looks so much more accurate when in comparison to the Hasbro transformation, but most of this is based on the Hasbro transformation, and I think the way the jetpack actually attaches to Prime is fantastic. I really liked how the legs detached from Jetfire and were attached here onto the base of Prime. That was so nicely done. Just overall, a fantastic looking figure. Really does look like a model upon first glance, and I think they did a really nice job in just updating the original toy, making it a lot more accurate to the movie, and certainly a lot more enjoyable. So Jet Power Prime, Jetfire and Optimus, definitely some of the best Studio Series figures that we've seen this line put out. And of course, Michael Bay movies are nothing without a Bumblebee, and the coolest Bumblebee that I think we've had released so far would be the Revenge of the Fallen version. Now I know some of you were probably thinking that I would choose the Dark the Moon release, which is fantastic, but I just think overall this is the best Bumblebee we've seen released for the Studio Series based on the Michael Bay movies. This thing looks fantastic. I love the colours, I think the deep dark orange that we have for this is amazing. The paint apps for the most part, besides some missing details here for the feet, are really nicely done. A lot better when in comparison to what we saw for the Dark the Moon version, and just overall I think it looks fantastic. I really like the Camaro from the 2009 movie, so the modifications they made here to the chest look great. I do like the dark paint apps that we have here. I think the Battle Mask head sculpt also looks fantastic. As you guys can see, we do get that really cool looking Stinger Blaster, and unlike the 15th anniversary pack, the shoulders and the actual forearm guards have been completely painted. Now this is undeniably one of the most accurate versions of Bumblebee that we have ever seen released at the deluxe price point. The old figures back in 2009, whilst may have been made out of better materials, they really had nothing when compared to this in terms of accuracy. We actually get the full door-winged look like we saw in the film. The backpack is incredibly neat and compressed, and the way the legs come together is fantastic. He really was like a mini masterpiece. So yeah, Revenge of the Fallen Bumblebee, definitely one of the coolest figures we've seen for this line so far, and I also think the articulation is exceptional as well. Now we've got another Optimus Prime, and I know this will cause some controversy, but it is the premium finish Takara SS05. Now the reasoning behind why I chose him is because the mold in general isn't bad, especially when in comparison to the likes of the Dark the Moon Voyager, but the paint apps, my goodness, have turned what was kind of a mediocre Optimus into a fantastic looking figure. This thing, when posed on the shelf, looks insane, and he came with the Ion Blasters, he also included the Energon Swords, which I think was awesome, and he really did have that awesome orange fading for the hood of the truck, which I just think was exceptional. And overall it's a pretty nicely done looking version of Optimus. Had they tidied up this chest hinge much like we saw on the SS32, this would have been fantastic, but just overall such a nicely done looking Optimus, and to have this type of design back when I was a kid, I would have been in love, as this thing is just super poseable, not too complex to transform, and really does look as if though it's leapt out of the film. I really love the way this guy's turned out. That head sculpt's fantastic. It's just such a cool Optimus Prime design in general. So premium finish Optimus, definitely one of the best Bayverse figures I think we've seen this Studio Series line put out. Then we're going to turn to some Decepticons, so a character of which needs no introduction introduction at all had to be the recently released and reviewed over on the channel Leader Class The Fallen. This thing is incredible. I think it's probably going to be in the top 10 best Bayverse Studio Series figures of all time list if I ever decide to put one of those out. This thing looks incredible. Now granted, they could kind of cheat considering The Fallen never transformed in the movie, but the accuracy they were able to obtain with this figure is just mind-blowing. He literally does look like a masterpiece. The attention to detail for the face was exquisite, and one thing which made him super cool is that you could actually remove the faceplate to reveal the Fallen's battle-damaged, defeated face like we see towards the final act of the movie, which I just think is so cool. So The Fallen undeniably is one of the best Bayverse Studio Series figures we've ever seen. The design just screams Bayverse with these weird tendrils that attach here onto the arms, that kind of chicken-legged look that most of those ROTF Decepticons had. As I mentioned in my review, he was literally the ultimate Decepticon, and I think this Leader Class figure was one of the best they've put out for the Bayverse line since it began way back in 2018. So awesome figure. If you're a fan of Revenge of the Fallen or the Michael Bay movies, then you have to get this guy into the collection. And talking of Revenge of the Fallen, one of my favourite Megatrons that we've seen from this line would have to be the Transformers 2 version. Now, not only did this destroy the version that we saw originally released for 2009, even his Leader Class counterpart, this thing puts that to shame, but it just looked so accurate to the movie. It was an amazing improvement. I thought the head sculpt was just terrific, the overall body proportions, the design was so cool. They actually used this as the basis for the Dark of the Moon Shockwave. It was that well done. I thought his fusion cannon was way cooler when in comparison to both the Voyager and the Leader that had came out prior. I thought the claw was awesome, just the design is so nicely done. We've got the turbines here at the back. Articulation also, besides the missing waist joint, was really well done for a Megatron. He had ankle tilts, which was fantastic. I thought the tread design here for the legs was super accurate to the movie, and they didn't skimp out on any of the detail. Now granted, it would have been so cool had he been completely painted in silver, and I am hoping that he does get a premium deco release, but just the detail looks so awesome. So definitely one of the best versions of Megatron that we've seen this line put out, being better than the first movie and the Dark of the Moon release in my opinion. Now coming back to some of the Autobots for this line, a character which had to be included is Ironhide. This thing is super sought after for one reason and one reason only. It's because it's a fantastic figure. It is probably one of the best Voyager Autobots that we've ever seen for the Studio Series line, and like I mentioned in my review of the 15th anniversary release, and even in its standalone review way back in 2018, this thing does put the masterpiece to shame. I think the chest is fantastic, playability is way more enjoyable than that significantly more expensive MP release, and it just looks so nicely done. The head sculpt is way more accurate when in comparison to pretty much any of the versions that came out prior. I think the chest is awesome, one of the best chests for an Ironhide that we've ever seen. He actually had the proper movie accurate cannon, so no funky mech tech gimmick going on with these. They looked awesome. I thought the chest design here for the wheels was great. The only thing that was slightly lacking would be the bumper and the ankle articulation, but the paint detail, especially on the 15th anniversary 5-pack, was awesome with the metallic toes, the grey components that we had here for the knees, and this new and improved torso. I just thought he was a fantastic figure. So definitely Bayverse Ironhide from this line, one of the best releases that they've put out, and he also had a super enjoyable transformation that resulted in a pretty neat looking GMC truck mode. Now we're going to come back to some Decepticons. Now this was one that I wasn't too sure whether or not I should include on the list, but then I took a look at its original figure, and undeniably it's one of the coolest, especially from an engineering perspective, that we've seen released recently, and it is Galvatron. Galvatron from Transformers 4. This was one of the hot releases for this year. Along with the Fallen, this was a character that I've wanted ever since 2018, and for the most part I think the design team delivered, especially with what they had to work with. Basically, when Galvatron transformed, that entire truck would disappear in the movie, whereas here with a toy, they have to put that somewhere, and at a Voyager price point, I think they did a pretty terrific job. The detail is amazing, especially here for the head sculpt. It was painted beautifully, it was sculpted immaculately. I thought this whole chest region, despite it appearing to be a little too flat, was also very nicely detailed. Just overall, a marked improvement over that original version. Way more skinnier and thinner when in comparison to that 2014 release. It actually had the hole at the back, which was accurate to the film, something which not even the original version could accomplish. So that was a really nice attention to detail. just overall way more cooler, way more posable, actually had a waist joint, which was awesome. So definitely Age of Extinction Galvatron got to be one of the biggest improvements when in comparison to its original version, and definitely one of the coolest entries I think we've seen into this line so far. And now we're down to the final two that I've picked for this list, and I think next up I'm going to show you guys another leader class, and it is Grindor / Blackout. And this was one of the first molds that we saw for the Studio series and really did set the bar for how awesome this line could be. This thing destroyed its original counterpart. I'm talking about Blackout. I know they're the same mold, but characters do differ, but Blackout was such an improvement over its original version, and the same can also be said here with Grindor. They actually did improve some things with this mold, such as the articulated fingers, but detail-wise, this figure was absolutely incredible. It's very similar to the Masterpiece. The Masterpiece basically took this as a basis and just developed over it, making it to be a Masterpiece. But for a leader class, a budgeted mainline release, this was fantastic. The detail was awesome. The articulation was okay. He was missing a waist joint, etc. But really such an improvement over his original version. And for those who aren't able to pick up the Masterpiece, this really isn't a bad substitute by any means, as it's actually one of the best mainline leader figures that I think we've ever seen officially produced. And that leads me on to, we actually have one more. So we weren't down to the final two, but we are now. So the next one is Voyager class Sentinel Prime. Much like Galvatron and the Fallen, this was a figure that I was super pumped to see into the Studio series, and they definitely didn't disappoint. Detail wise, this thing is fantastic and was better than both the original Voyager and Leader. I thought the detail here for the chest windows, the way they actually put those spinning cogs in there, was just so cool. The head sculpt was fantastic, as so was all of this collar detail. He was just way more streamlined. The only area where he was lacking in would be accessories, but that was something that DNA Design did fix, and he is slightly wobbly when it comes to articulation. The waist detaches way too easily, and he doesn't have any form of ankle pivot. So if they do approach this character again, those are two areas where I think they should perfect it. But overall, such a fantastic figure, especially in terms of a display piece, and the head sculpt is just absolutely mind-boggling how much detail they were able to pack into this. And he was actually the right colour. He was red instead of that purplish pink that we saw on the original Leader and Voyager figure. So definitely Sentinel Prime, such a fantastic figure. And now we're down to the last entry, which I think is one of the coolest figures that I've ever picked up from this line, and is one that paint-wise really does amaze me. It's got to be Shockwave. Shockwave from Transformers 3. This thing is mind-blowing. If they were to take this and upscale it, it would basically be a masterpiece. They did such a fantastic job. A massive improvement when in comparison to its Voyager release. I thought the detail for the head was just exceptional. The chest looks awesome. The massive arm cannon no longer had that mech tech gimmick, which I actually liked, but now that they scrapped it, it did allow them to refine this to match the movie. This guy is just exceptional. This is a really nicely done leader figure. Shockwave from Transformers 3, undeniably one of the coolest Bayverse designs, so really such an exceptional figure. And that pretty much wraps up my list. Now that I've come to the end of it, I'm thinking maybe I should have picked out Grimlock, as he too is also a fantastic figure. But overall, the figures that I mentioned on this list, by far some of the coolest, some of the best. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Out of all of the Michael Bay Studio Series figures that we've seen released in the past 4 years, which are the ones that you guys think are exceptional, and are there any here that you plan on adding to the collection, or do you think I should have swapped some of these choices out with other figures? Definitely be sure to let me know down in the comment section below, and until my next video, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.